Related question. Is there any competition for funds between the two projects? Okay, so the answer, I should have a drum roll. The state funds of 194.7 million were authorized for the NLX project. Appropriation provides state match to seek the federal funding exclusively for final design and construction of NLX. Also, to purchase locomotives and cars for NLX and Minnesota's share of the equipment needed for Borealis. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so we're starting off on a good note. All right. We will do our very best to answer the questions that were submitted and be very transparent in our presentation. But I do feel, and I shared this with Karen and Bob earlier, to just level set. You had so many great questions, and many of those questions today do not have answers. You're the best. So with that, Mary, if you want to make a few opening comments.
So the Office of Tribal Affairs used to be part of Government Affairs at MnDOT. And with executive orders and being codified into statute for government to government consultation with the tribal governments, it's a separate office of its own. And so our goal in our mission in Tribal Affairs Office is to have government to government relationships with the 11 federally recognized tribes to share geography with Minnesota. We also work to ensure that we can maximize any economic opportunities that are happening within the state with tribal governments. And if there's inclusion and conversations happening, and so that both sides have the same amount of information and we can have those important dialogue. That important dialogue that goes along with those big decisions that impact everyone in the state of Minnesota. And so I'm excited to be here to learn more of your perspective and hear from all of you and hopefully be a resource to any of you who have questions that I can help with. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Mary.
Yeah.
All right, great.
Okay, well, good morning again, and thanks for taking the time out of the day to meet with us. It's great to see all the people here in the room today and all the people online. So glad there's a lot of interest. So I'm gonna grab this. So let's get going. So start with an overview of Northern Lights Express, or NLX for short. So
before you dive in, in the interest of time, let's rip off a couple more questions.
Okay.
All right. So these I think are you're going to address.
Okay.
Regarding the frequency, the previous service development plan. So people want to know how often is this train going to run? Another question we got was how long will a full round trip take? And is there any possibility of more stops to be installed in the future?
Sure. Okay. So we can dive into that as I kind of go through this. That's okay. So what the service is the proposed passenger train service between the Twin Cities, or Minneapolis specifically, and Duluth. We'll have intermediate stops in Coon Rapids, Cambridge, Hinkley, and Superior. It'll have, as it's currently envisioned, a lot of work is done. I think around 2012, 2013, up to about into early 2018. I'll let Bob confirm that if I get that wrong. But that's been on hold for a while. So we did a lot of work, got through an environmental review, and it was conceived as having 4 round trips a day with about 2.5 hours travel time. And that was important. That was really to be competitive with driving, potentially faster and inclement weather rush hour. So 4 round trips, so you have time throughout the day, and then 5-hour round trip, and same way in one day. So that gives you some time to actually get to your destination, to your business, or whatever you're planning to do, make it get back the same day. In terms of capital improvements, it's going to include track upgrades, new and extended siding. So I always tell everybody, think back to your junior high math problem where train A leaves city A at 20 miles an hour, and train B leaves city B at 50 miles an hour. Where do they meet? So, we need, because we're adding new trains, we need to add capacity so those trains can pass and figure out where they're going to be. It's also going to include signal upgrades on the line, and what we call positive train control, which is a safety system that's on that line that's needed for passenger rail service. We're also going to do some bridge upgrades, and then also I really want to emphasize grade crossing improvements because passenger trains are going to be operating at a faster speed than the current freight trains on that line. So we do need to do upgrades where we're going to be operating higher speeds to make sure that motorists and pedestrians and bicyclists are staying safe. And then the other thing is new and expanded station. So it's going to start at the Target Field Station downtown Minneapolis. It's been the Twins game. It's just across the street to north and down in that track level. We need to do some improvements there to accommodate additional trains down there. That's where the North Star Commuter Rail currently serves. And then up in Coon Rapids, that'd be a brand new station. When the legislature gave us money last year, they did specify that that be an interline station. And so as it was really planned, it was just a stop for NLX. They directed us to make that interline so it would connect with the Empire Builder, which is an existing long distance train between Chicago and Seattle, Portland. And then it would also potentially allow us to do connections with North Star as well. And then we'd have new stations in Cambridge, in Hinckley and Superior, and then we'd use the historic Union Depot into this. And then, as Ann mentioned, that 194.7, that's for fall design and construction and equipment purchases, and that provides what we call the local match, which is 20% of the project cost. So we can go after federal grants for the rest of the cost for fall design and construction and the purchase equipment. And I do want to, I get a lot of questions, so I'll just touch on this briefly, why the legislation includes purchasing equipment for NLX and our share of equipment needed for the Borealis. And that's really anybody that deals with like specialized equipment. It's really expensive. So the more you buy, the lower the per unit cost. And so that lowers our overall cost if we do it all as one acquisition. And then it also allows us to maintain it as a fleet that can be interchanged amongst the different services. So that reduces the amount of spare equipment that we need for if something breaks down. And also what's going to be in maintenance. So just want to talk about where the project is now, because I think we did get a lot of questions about a lot of detailed questions about looking at the back end. So I really want to spend a few minutes kind of touching on where the project is and what the path forward is. So I'm going to refer back to the Federal Railroad Administration, which guides all this, and we're going to be seeking the federal funding, so we need to follow their processes. So this slide shows the overall life cycle stages for a project where you're seeking federal funding. So first, I'll touch on them a little bit more in just a minute in different slides, but just to give you an overview now. So the slide shows the stages and the corresponding FRA funding programs that go along with it. So step one is systems planning, and that's really doing a state rail plan. So we're in the process of, that has to be updated every few years. We're in the process of doing that now. So if you hop on that website, type in state rail plan, there's opportunities to get involved. So we'd love to hear your feedback. And that we're looking at getting that done probably sometime around the end of the year. And that's going to lay out what's your vision for rail, when it comes to passenger rail, what are the potential lines that we'd be looking at developing. So NLX is one of the lines, was a priority line in our last rail plan, and that's what we're working at. So is the Borealis. So we're hitting the two priorities, and now, next step we want to hear what should we be working at. So as you get into developmental stages, that's really where you start working on specific projects. So under the FRA, there's got two stages: project planning and project development. And I'll touch on those in just a minute. But those are really being funded by a new FRA corridor identification and development program, or corridor ID for short, because that's a mouthful otherwise. And that really funds that. And so that's where we will work. So because the project has been sitting on the shelf for a number of years, we need to go back and do updates, and that's why we're really still in that phase right now. And I'll touch on project development in just a minute, and then implementation. really refers to final design and construction. That's where we're gonna be seeking the big dollars, for that effort. And then the last stage is operations.
Greg, can I just interject? You mentioned the corridor ID. I think it's important for, folks in the room and joining us remotely that the corridor ID program is a brand new federal program. So there's no guidebook. There's no like, this is how, they used to do it. This is brand new. And NLX is in that first cohort in corridor ID, which is really, really a good thing.
So that's a great segue. So let's talk, so under this new corridor ID program, and again, we got accepted into that back in December with an initial grant. And the reason that's important is that moving forward, projects that complete that program are going to be prioritized by FRA for capital funding. So you're going to have better odds than just doing something on your own and applying for the capital funding dollars. That this is kind of their check system, make sure you're filling all our boxes so that there's a lot less risk and they're more comfortable giving big dollars for final design and construction. So we're in the step one process right now, getting awarded back in December. We got our grant obligated late March, and so we're working with FRA and a number of tasks right now. First step under the program is to do a project management plan. We should have that. We submitted our draft to FRA last month. Yeah, a few comments, so we got that back into them, and it's it's how quickly they can review and sign off, so we can move on. And then the next piece of that is really doing what the rest of step one is really developing a scope, schedule, and budget for a service development plan for the service, or SDP for short. And that's what I'm just saying. As we move into the presentation, FRA funds this effort at 100%, so we don't need any local investment in it, and that's great, so that we can keep a lot of money that we've got from the legislature to start doing the rest of the tasks moving forward. So because we didn't have a previous service development plan that was wrapped up, and I think was it 2015, Bob? 2016, I think, thereabouts. We needed, it's a little bit older. Some key things have changed. We had a pandemic, travel patterns have changed, so railroads have changed how they operate. So FRA is requiring us to do a gap analysis of the previous service development plan to determine what needs to be updated. So we're working on that right now. We'll be working on that here with the FRA to get that done to figure out what does need to be updated versus what we reuse. And then that's going to inform the rest of the step one in developing that scope, schedule, and budget for developing the service development plan. And that's really what you do under step two. So we're, I think, pretty far ahead compared to a lot of other quarters that they get funding. I was talking to Wisconsin yesterday. A few folks in Wisconsin, I know that they're still in the process of trying to get their grant allocated. So we're close to 2 months ahead of a couple other, but at least some other regional corridors. And then I think just as we move into the service development plan, we need to get. And I need to start with this. FRA's, because as Andy mentioned, this is a brand new program. FRA doesn't have everything figured out yet. So I think they've really been focusing on what's required to get people in step one. And then as they get everybody in it, they're going to figure out, how is step two going to work. And so you've asked some really good questions. We have some of the same questions. So more to come. So it's a little frustrating, but it's a brand new program, and FRA needs time to get some of these things figured out. So step two, what really goes into that, and we'll need to figure out what we need to update or what's still valid. But that's really where you start looking at ridership and revenue. You look at what is the service plan, which includes speeds, schedules, number of trains a day, and all that was looked at a number, back when Bob was working on this a number of years ago, and they looked at different numbers of round trips, different operating speeds, and we landed at that 4 round trips at 90 miles an hour. So that's where those things are figured out. It also includes doing what we call rail traffic control modeling, and that's again getting back to that junior high math problem, trying to use CDA to figure out if the capital improvements that we identified previously, if those are still all accurate, or if we need to adjust something, if we don't need some. I think he has stuff, I think he's running maybe a few less trains a day, but they're longer trains, so. Maybe we don't need all the signs, but maybe we need all, so those things will need to get figured out.
Greg, on the service development plan, you talked about, we'll need to figure out what needs to be updated. How do we figure that out?
Sure.
Where's that direction coming from?
It's coming from FRA, so I think they gave us a spreadsheet with like, I think it was like 130, 140 someplace. Different items that they wanted to look at, so we just got to go back, look at everything. Put in our thoughts on it and then submit that to FRA, and then there's probably a discussion on that. They also need to look at everything, see if they agree or if they disagree, and then if they agree, great. If they disagree, we probably have to do some negotiations on that.
Great, thanks.
Sure. And then the other thing I do want to touch on, because we did get some questions about this under that service development plan, we also need to do a service area and access analysis. So while that was done previously, that's where we identified. First we identified city locations for the stations. And I get a lot of questions about this. We want stops in my community. And so typically the service area because this is an intercity service, which is a little bit different than like commuter service. Everybody's running North Star, stops are maybe 4, 5, 10 miles. This is an intercity service, so the service area is a lot different. It's usually about 25 miles in urban areas and about 25 to 50 in rural areas. So we're trying to make sure that the stations that fit those thresholds. So that's why we don't have cities that station every single community. And that also does impact travel time. So the more stations, the more stops you make, the slower the train is. And so we're trying to be competitive with travel time. Stop at every city, you probably lose the rut. Maybe gain some riders, but you lose a lot because it takes you 4 hours to get make the trip. So it's really a balance of that. And also balancing cost effectiveness with ridership, revenue, construction, and maintenance costs. So all that is looked at during that step 2, that access, station access. That's all I looked at previously. We've heard from a few communities that development has happened around some of these station sites are nearby. So there's a couple that we may need to take a closer look at. But really, as I get into like site development stuff, that really happens starting in step 3. So that's probably my good segue. So step 3, once you get that service development plan done and signed off by FRA, you're ready to roll into step 3. As you complete each step, you need to go back to FRA, apply for an additional grant to proceed with the next step. So step 1 is great. It basically is that everything you need that sets up step 2, so you can kind of roll in that seamlessly once you get the grant obligated. So hopefully minimize this hold up. But then once you come out of step 2, it's going to have this part, what the service is going to look like, and we'll also have this prioritized list of projects for implementation. So we still have some questions what FRA is thinking about that. As we look this, if it's all done at one time, or if you maybe need to, as you get an implementation, if you're maybe phasing it, that you're doing like all grade crossing improvements at once, and then you come back later and get a different grant for stations or traffic improvements. You don't have the answer yet, but we're as eager to have an answer as you are from FRA. So, but coming out, we'll know what the path is looking like moving forward. And then step 3 is really doing preliminary engineering, which is really getting design up to about 15 to 30% design, depending on kind of the components and what's needed for the project. And then also doing the environmental work or the NEPA review. So we're hoping that that's a lot of updates. Rather than that's what we're expecting from this, because all this was done. So we're hoping that we don't have to like redesign if the siding is in the same location. We don't necessarily need to redesign that, but maybe we need to extend it out. So we're hoping that's more limited preliminary engineering and then more of an update to the environmental documentation, really to reflect current conditions. All that was wrapped, the environmental reviews wrapped up in 2017. Because endangered species have changed. So I come from an historic preservation background. We have properties now 50 years of age back then. So we need to address some of those things. Once you in FRA will fund that 80%, and so that's for step 2 and step 3, we're going to be using part of that funding from the legislature last year to provide match, to get those federal dollars to complete step 2 and step 3. And then, once you complete preliminary engineering and the environmental review, you're ready to move into that implementation phase. And that's where you're gonna need the big grant from FRA to really move forward with final design and construction. So I want to back up here real quick. So, as I know, right here, project planning, the grants for final design construction, those could take a year. So we are gearing up to be ready when those come out so that we can apply as soon as we can. So, we're doing everything we can to kind of condense all these steps down as much as we can.
Brent, what's the NOFO?
Sorry, yeah, it's a notice of funding opportunity, and that's what federal agencies use for for big programs, for big grant dollars. So let's talk a little bit about the implementation stage again. So we'll need to get those federal dollars in place to move forward. We have a match, which is great news, so that makes us a lot more competitive. But again, we don't know, based on what that prioritized list of projects is coming out of the service development plan, we may need to apply for different grants depending on what FRA wants us to do. But we get those grants, then we're ready to move into final design. So that includes a number of different things, and that's where you're really advancing your plan from that preliminary engineering of 15 to 30% all the way up to 100% design. And so we're also going to need to be doing public engagement because that's where we're going to be starting to look at station designs and impacts as we're doing construction. So we'll want to do a lot more engagement, and that's where we're going to be. Also, we have a few transit folks in here, so we're also going to be wanting to talk with some of the transit folks about what some of those connections are going to look like, so that if we need to add a bus stop within the station, we can do that. And then we also need to determine the letting method. That's going to depend on, this all one big project, multiple projects. We're operating on a host road, which is Burlington over Santa Fe. We need their agreements with them to do this. And so they may be doing some of the work. So we need to figure all that out so that it's not just we make assumptions. We need to work with our host road to figure all that out. And then we also need to get those construction agreements done with BNSF again. They own the tracks, not MnDOT, so we can't move forward without their participation in the agreement. So we also have I can't remember, did the RFP close yet or not? Okay, yeah, so we had an RFP out to get some assistance from a contractor to help us do some of those negotiations. So I think that closed this week then, last week. Too many things going on, I can't keep track of some of those details.
In the last week, let's just say,
So-
that might be tomorrow, but.
So we're working on that, and that consultant will help us work through those negotiations agreements that we need with the PSF. And then once we know the letting method and how all the different bid packages are going to be done, then we need to prepare all the construction documents. And so that's not just like the plans, that includes all your specifications, all the requirements for how you're going to do monitoring to meet your environmental obligations, do inspections, do community engagement and so forth. So lots of pieces you need to figure out. And then really you're ready to then move into the construction phase, which is really letting all the contracts for construction. And so, that's constructing all the stations, all the track improvements, all the signals, bridge improvements, all the grade crossing improvements, etc. So once all those are built, and they may be built phases or stages, you have to do inspections while you're doing construction, making sure they're being built correctly, to do final inspections. And then I think one thing that's really important, a lot of people miss, is that once all this is constructed, we actually need to do systems testing, and especially as you start looking at signals and everything to make sure that they're operating properly. We don't want to have the signal not working on the rail line where train goes past and we have issues, or if a gate doesn't go down, we don't want that to happen, that process. So we want to need to do testing, make sure all the stuff is working as designed, and then getting it certified. And so, once we complete construction, it's not automatically moving into operation. Need to get everything to make sure it's all safe and working as needed. And then I also want to touch on equipment procurement. So that's going to happen concurrent to final design and construction. It's going to be probably a separate procurement. Construction contractors don't own rail equipment. So that'll be separate. Again, our goal is to do a big procurement for both the need for NLX and for the new Borealis service, our share of the need for the Borealis service. So we provide equipment, and then for our partners in Wisconsin, we provide for the equipment for that service as well. So that's a very long lead time for that equipment. So, we'll get started with that probably around the same time as fall design, with the goal of having that equipment in place when we're ready to start operations. So let's move on to the next thing. So once all that's done, we're ready to move into the operations stage. And this is where we're going to be probably around, as we start nearing the end of construction, we're going to be applying for what's called a restoration enhancement grant from FRA. And that helps fund operations for the first few years of operations while ridership grows. And that's really important because if you, like anything, if you're brand new, you might get an initial rush of riders that are interested the first few days, but overall, it's probably going to be low while you're building awareness and integrating into people's thoughts on how they're going to travel. So ridership doesn't start here, it grows to there. So that grant helps pay for the operating costs, minimize some of our, help stabilize our operational costs while that ridership development. Another thing we need to do is negotiate the agreement with the service provider, and that's going to look at everything from cost for the service, where they're charging us, safety. No worries.
Keeps your boundaries on.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is going on there. He's gonna have lunch there.
That's great. Okay. So negotiating agreements with the service providers, that's everything, all costs, the safety, the ticket pricing, insurance, fuel charges to, onboard amenities, and how we're going to promote the service. So a lot of details go into that. It doesn't happen overnight. And then the other thing we need to do is work in those transit coordinations and start figuring out all the schedules, with our local transit providers here. That's where it's going to be important to start, coordinating trains coming in here. We want to make sure that there's a bus, around the same time so that it comes in 10 minutes before the train. It doesn't take off, so that's great for somebody getting on the train, but not somebody getting off the train. They're waiting a couple hours for the next bus to come by. We want to be able to coordinate those and time those. That's what we're going to be doing a lot of those in depth. We know on the front end what the transit connections are going to be. That's where this is where we're going to start working out those schedule details.
Could you speak up just a little bit more?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, yeah. So that's really where this really gets to be about all the scheduling of all those connections. And then we also need to be doing operations testing. And so that's both getting crews qualified on the line. We don't want, engineers and conductors and brakemen that are responsible for operating trains not being experienced in front of bus passes the line. We want to get them qualified, right? And that's a federal requirement as well. So, and also get experience so that they're comfortable operating a train. And that also ties in with testing their equipment and schedules. If we're buying new equipment, we don't want to put it in service that breaks down. We need to be running that for a while. Break-in period, work through all the bugs that may be happen in the equipment and get that resolved. So breakdowns, or if you're operating a train and fuse goes out, there's a short circuit and you're running without heat or something in the water, which would be a good thing, right? So to get those, make sure everything's working, and then also once that equipment's operating properly and gets crews qualified, we'll probably be running some training just to make sure all the schedules are working properly, so that we're maintaining our schedule, because we want to start and trains aren't really optimistic and trains are running. So we're going to have a good, reliable service.
I think we have an opportunity here with this slide before you go into it for another question.
Sure.
Question is, we would like to request the state make it a requirement for the train to slow down to match freight train speeds when passing through population centers such as cities.
Sure. That's one of those things we're going to be looking at as part of that service development plan and just kind of what our, and then that's going to be kind of, that's going to determine our travel time. But I think we need to balance, we don't want to be, big cities don't want to be risky. If there's existing kind of agreements, we'll need to look at those. But we also don't want to be going 10 miles an hour through town where we have 20 minutes going through a town and then we're back to that 4 hours. So we want to control safety. We also, I'm going to touch on this in just a minute as well. I think something that will help probably address some of the concerns as well. So I'll get back to that in just a second. So, but once all this is done, then we can actually start the service and do the big celebration, and then we go through our trips. So, since you asked the question, I think this goes, and I do want to touch on a couple of complementary projects that are happening concurrently to this and are going to benefit NLS as well. So, first is Hinkley Corridor Grade Crossing Elimination and Improvement Study. And this is the same corridor as NLS. Basically from Coon Rapids up to the border on Wisconsin. And so, my notes, so don't miss anything on here. So we did get a quarter, it's a $600,000 study. We got $480,000 from F8 to do this. $120,000 is being provided by MnDOT. And this is really a project, it's a corridor study to evaluate a good chunk of the NLS corridor. And it will identify existing conditions, best practices, and opportunities to define and implement a multi-year, multi-phase program of projects, policies and procedures across the corridor to drive measurable improvement in safety outcomes for both motorists and pedestrians, and also to reduce the amount of trespassing on the corridor. I think that's going to be really important, especially as we're operating at higher speeds. More trespassing and getting hit by train. And I think I touched on the grade crossing stuff. So this is going to start paving the way. There's a small caveat with this. We did get the grant for this before we got the award to start proceeding with that NLS. So the goal is really to look at freight with an eye towards NLS. So now we got the F8 grant. We'll be keeping both in mind. This will probably start to inform, because I talked about that part as this project previously. This will probably help start to inform some of that as well. And, the obligation process has been a little bit slower. This one, I think, was awarded last summer. I think you're getting close to getting obligated. We're really quick with NLS. And so I think they should be getting started here this summer on this study and should wrap up sometime in 2025. And so,
Could you repeat again what you said about the speed through towns?
So I think some of that's going to be figured out as we do some updates to the service development plan, but I think this study is going to probably help inform some of that as well. So we'll want to balance, look at what some of the senior requirements are, or commitments as well, and that will inform some of our ridership analysis as we move into that service development update as well.
Will there be any public input on that?
We haven't. Because we're still really in that gap analysis with FRA. I don't have an answer for you at this point. So if we need to do update, then we'll have to probably develop a public engagement plan. We just aren't there to get that.
Is there something we can comment on now with what's going on?
I mean, if you have comments, you can always hop on our website, and I think there's a place that you can submit comments.
Before we get into this slide, there's a question that must have just been made for this slide.
Yeah.
Tell us about the impact on local transit systems serving the proposed stations. There you go.
Sure. So again, we'll probably, be starting to look at some of that as we do some of the SDP updates, and then really, we'll want to talk about it with those local transit providers to have first and last mile connections from this. And I think that NLS is going to provide a great opportunity to start. Right now, a lot of it, there's kind of limited connectivity between some of the transit systems as you get on their jurisdictions. So that we're really hoping that NLS is going to provide some of those connections so that, transit systems are connecting in or multiple connecting into the analogs, you can hop on the train, get close to where you're going, and then hop on the next transit system for your last mile connection.
And I would imagine there'd be some opportunity for our RTC folks to engage with that in that planning process to see where strategically those might make most sense.
Yeah.
Very good point, and it's an opportunity to
Yeah.
acknowledge here in the room, we have Michelle
You know,
Lichty,
Yeah, you got it.
with MnDOT, who works with you on that very program.
And it's not just the buses too, it's also, I don't know about Uber and Lyft, but then you could possibly have bicycles and other, transit mobility services available too, so it opens up a lot of those.
Yeah, so a lot more to come on that as we get further into the project.
Right,
So the other thing I did want to touch on about, to the next slide then, is this moving career, this sort of forward program. Again, this is like the first mobility incubator in the US, its focus. I think a lot of you are very familiar with this. So trying to be quick, focus on rural, small urban areas, less than 200,000. Our goal is really to support partners with ideas to improve mobility across the area. So, and then the selected projects do receive that technical support to further develop our ideas. And I know East Central got the phase 1 grant to explore the creation of some of those transfer opportunities. A couple of the transit services here to connect with Benelux. So we really appreciate your efforts to start looking ahead. And then we know that the application for phase 2 is due in April 20th. I'm not part of that program, so they haven't told me who applied or where they're going with that. So if you got questions, sorry, I can't answer those for you, but we look forward to continuing to work with our local partners on those connections.
those communication lines open.
So I think that's it for the presentation, and that'll hand it over back to Dan.
Well, don't go too far. So, I think we hit on a good number of questions that were submitted, prior to this presentation, but we have a few more to go through, and so, I'm just gonna whip through them and, in no particular order, okay? So don't fall asleep, because your question might be coming. So we're gonna start with, I'm gonna give you 3 questions.
Yes.
That I think you can answer in one response. Are there any alternate sites being explored for Hinckley? What are the steps necessary to finalize the locations of the Cambridge and Hinckley transit stations? And thirdly, at what stage of the project will the final site be identified? So people are wondering.
Sure. So getting back to that service development plan, I think I maybe touched this a little bit before, but we do need to do this. I think the locations have been identified. Let's see if everybody wants to revisit it. Expect that they probably don't. So I think assuming we don't need to revisit those, we need to slowly try and look at that stationary access analysis and probably do some updates. We've heard from some of our communities that a few things have changed or some of the originally proposed sites were, so we'll probably need to go back and revisit those to see if they're still valid or if we potentially need to look at different locations. But then again, as it's going to be identifying the site within the community, not removing it from this kind of in what. Yeah.
And when you do pick those sites, do the cities and counties have any ability to make their wishes known?
We probably expect to want to do some engagements on that, because we're going to need to look at if we look at alternate location, we're going to need to do that access analysis for that as well, which is going to tie into what are the road systems, sidewalk or trail systems to connect, and what might be upgraded.
All right. Now that was pretty good. 1 answer, 3 questions. All right. At the Cambridge stop, if it is at the city center, will the passenger train hold up traffic on Highway 95 when it is boarding and unboarding? This is a very simple question.
Yeah, so we're expecting that or not. No.
No. I like that question. Okay, I like that answer, actually. Will the length of it extend across the highway and sit there for any length of time?
again, we're not expecting that to, and I do want to just reiterate, these are passenger trains, so we're looking at, anywhere from 3 to 4 to 10 cars maximum, and probably 1 or 2 locomotives at max. So you're looking at a train that's a couple hundred feet, a few hundred feet long, whereas a freight, that has pretty good acceleration. You think of locomotives for passenger trains are more like your sports car versus your sedan, but the freight trains are. And the trains, again, a few hundred feet long versus freight rail train would be a couple miles long. So we're able to accelerate faster, operate faster, and much shorter train, which should further minimal crossing gap time.
And related question, how many cars will there be attached to the engine?
Sure, we don't have the answer yet, so that's gonna be informed by what our final analysis, ridership analysis is for where we land in the service development plan. If the numbers are where we were, I think we were looking at the original service development plan, I think was looking at 6 bi-level cars. Ridership, if we're looking at equipment, I think those have a capacity of about 96 people per car in the seats. If we're looking at single level equipment, I think they have about, say, like 50 or 60 to 70 seats. So depending which equipment we go with, that's going to affect that final train length. Because we do want it for that equipment to be interchangeable, so we don't have specialized equipment on all these different ones.
Good question. Will there be any risk to businesses, houses, city park property adjacent to the existing tracks with a second line being installed? Are we installing a second line?
So the current plan would be siding extensions or new sidings, but not a double track all the way. So we're not looking at least at this point, what's in the current service development plan is looking at double tracking all the way.
So much of that will be informed by the whatever the revised or updated service development.
Yeah, we would just have that answer coming out.
Great.
Yeah.
Might help out with that answer. I think you're referring to Graham. The double track in his plan.
I don't know. I hadn't captured who said which
So that's
one.
one second to Graham that was proposed.
Where that exciting is. So most, I think, based on the current preliminary engineering, again, which is based on the existing line, most of that was all staying within existing railroad right away. I think we had maybe like an acre or two, I think like where we need to do acquisitions, which is largely all a little bit modified curves. So we think that would be, should still be further.
Let's see. Here's a good one. What are the plans for how the different stations will operate? Meaning, how will they be serviced? How will they be manned? How will they be ticketed? Will they have cameras?
Sure.
There's
So,
a softball.
so a lot more to come on that. We just aren't far enough along to make all those decisions.
Tell me more about the wayfinding at stations that could allow rural residents to independently access metropolitan destinations. Like the VA hospital or a college.
Sure. So again, all those wayfinding details are really going to be probably in that final design phase when we're working on all that. I can say that the existing target fuel station downtown Minneapolis is served by commuter already. So I mean, you come up to the street level. There's a big, I think there's a big sign there. There's the LRT stations right there that will take you to the airport or to the Veterans Hospital, or you can take the other line over to like the University of Minnesota or to the Capitol. So,
Okay. What is to be expected for a price for a ticket to use the express for a day? And in answering that, I'm gonna also ask you to provide some context on express.
okay. Thanks. So I have a preservation background. So historically, railroads have kind of named their trains or kind of identified different services. Like the local train, that's the one that stopped every town. Maybe had a baggage car with a pickup milk or a small package and drop it off. And then you'd have higher speeds trains like limited trains, which very few stops, and you'd have express trains to make few stops, but they would operate at higher speeds. So
So is this express?
So,
We were talking about.
so yeah, so I think generally, we're looking at, again, we're not looking at stopping every community operating at a high, a higher speed, so that's where the name Express comes from.
All right, and
I
back to
don't
the
know about
question.
anything on that.
And back to the question, the price of a ticket.
Sure, that's gonna be determined a lot closer to ridership. We'll probably look at some models as we're updating the service development plan to figure out revenue. But those actual details and pricing structure are gonna be much closer to the start of operations. And having, just announced a new service, that's stuff we were working on. I think we started working on that like last summer. So, about a year before we probably start service.
What type of security will be available to ensure safety of passengers?
Sure, so on board the train, everybody needs a ticket to board the train. I've had that, to show that proof to get on the train. And then we'll have crews on the train, engineers up in the cab, and we'll have conductor is in charge of the train, we're trying to make sure everybody has their ticket to get on the train. And they're gonna be the ones in charge, responsible for security on the train.
Somebody asked a question, could you clarify the response to the question on impacts to properties adjacent to potential second rails being installed? Are they saying there could be potential impacts?
So I mean, we're gonna be building we're gonna build the tracks or track upgrades to FRA standards, to make sure that we're staying safe.
So I think the short answer to that question is that right now, today, we are not in a position to be able to say yes or no.
And I think the impacts of the pretty broad questions on that one. So hopefully that answered it.
Any improvements that would be needed for second track or otherwise will be determined in that service development plan, which we do not have today. Let's see, safety measure again. Safety measures will be taken into it will impact, or will there be in the event of a medical emergency on this train?
Sure, so most passenger trains today have like AMDs up on the train, they have first aid kits. But I think if there is a major medical emergency, again, we have a conductor, brakeman, the car attendant that will be on the train. And so that conductor, if there is a medical emergency, they have that ability to contact emergency EMTs or 911 and coordinate stopping the train at the nearest grade crossing or nearest the road near the tracks to so that they connect and get somebody to the ambulance.
There's security related question. What assurances do residents have that this project won't increase drug trafficking into our communities? Some of these questions, I have to say, are borderline not MnDOT's jurisdiction, but we are doing our best to acknowledge all questions received.
Sure. Again, so we'll have a conductor that's responsible for maintaining safety on the train and monitoring for suspicious activity. So if you see something suspicious, then they would again reach out to police and try to stop the train and let the proper authorities deal with it.
And speaking of proper authorities, will the train be a gun-free zone or will concealed guns be allowed?
Sure. So we need to follow all federal and state laws, as well as any requirements of TSA, host road and operators. So
There's your answer. All right, now look at this. It's almost like we planned this. But we do have time for a few additional questions from folks in the room, and I went over here.
So, way down the road, when the time actually comes for the conductors and engineers, brakemen and car attendants to be hired, who will be their employer? Will it be the railroad or who employs them?
Sure.
And where will people go to get those jobs?
great question. So that's
Do you want to drive the train? Is that right here?
Maybe.
Okay.
we don't have that answer yet. That's going to be probably determined as part of that decision on what the op service provider will be. Like Amtrak, is operating the new service to Chicago from St. Paul. So they provide the cars. North Star, which is operated by Metro Transit. They contract out to BNSF to actually operate the trains. So Metro Transit owns equipment, but BNSF operates them with their.
But I can say it won't be MnDOT
All right.
in the back.
Clarifying question, when
Sure.
you're talking about each phase and, as you get to the next phase, we have to apply for, more federal funding. Is that federal funding part of the 194 million, or is that like a totally new grant that we have to apply?
So the 194 provides the matching dollars that we need to get the federal grants. So,
That's our part, that's the
yeah,
state.
so like the core ID, step one, FRA gives us up to 500,000, they pay for all of it. So that pays for like staff time, consultant work, et cetera. Once you get to step two, they'll pay, feds will pay 90%, MnDOT has to pay 10%, so we'll start tapping that.
Okay.
And some to that.
But it's
So-
already set aside, and it's not like we're applying to a totally new kind of grant.
So we'll need to apply for probably a couple grants. So already, once we complete step one, we need to apply for the step two grant. Complete step two, apply for the step three grant, but we have the dollars from the legislature to provide the match that we need to do the application. And then once we're ready for design construction, then we need to have 20% of the match dollars in place, which we have from that appropriation. And that provides that match to get to 80% of the funds from the FRA.
So is there a chance that we wouldn't, as we progress through these stages, that we wouldn't, those federal dollars be turned, those grants be turned down?
That like may not would not apply or,
That we would apply and we wouldn't be approved for it?
and
Let me take
let's
that,
go ahead, yeah,
okay?
sure, thanks.
So I'm tired of
Yeah,
yelling,
yeah,
Sean.
okay. No, that's a fair question, and, it's. Yeah. Anything's possible with Congress, right? So, MnDOT's commitment is we are doing everything that we can to get prepared to apply when those opportunities are presented. What remains unknown, Greg talked about the NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Remember, this is a new program. So we don't 110% know what that funding opportunity is going to be, or what any requirements might be, or any prerequisites might be. Okay, but, oh gosh, I don't recall the number, but there were many projects that applied for corridor ID that were not funded. So yeah, I mean, it's real.
And I know this is your meeting, but can I respond to her too?
Sure, we have, less than 60 seconds.
Great. I'm Bob Mansley with the St. Louis Lake Rail Authority, working on the enlarged project for many years. And we've worked a lot on acquiring the funding for the project. 194 million received by the state set aside for this project. Had a lot to do with our lobby effort and pushing for that money to get funded. And we're kind of transitioning now to get the federal funding put together for the project. So we're gonna be starting that year probably in August, September, in preparation for the next NOFO that Greg mentioned. And that NOFO should be coming out in like October, with applications due in December. So that's kind of our next goal, is to try to get funding for these guys to keep working. You're doing a great job.
And with that, that's a nice segue into, we're gonna wrap it up. And we thank, the team, and Karen for reaching out and inviting us. And we are, hope that you have found this to be informative, and, MnDOT is at your service. Thank you very much.
Lunch to follow.